Welcome to the Design Curious podcast. I am your host, Rebecca Ward, and in this podcast, it is my goal to help those who are interested in a career of interior design understand the ins and outs, the ups and downs of this very convoluted career, and see if it's the right choice for them. Through a combination of solo episodes, talking about specific subject matters of the career, to interviews with many designers from all around the globe. I will be asking them how they got to a career in interior design and what their path was. If it was a direct, very traditional route going through school and an internship, or if it was more circuitous, they had another career before entering into their passion of design. I always find all of those stories really fascinating, so I will love exploring that with you and take you along on that journey. You're now listening to Design Curious, a place where you, creative one, are here to learn about what it really is like to be an interior designer. And I'm your host and mentor, Rebecca Ward. If you're worried about how to succeed in a creative career, if you're ready to learn your next steps to become an interior designer, and if you want the satisfaction of doing something you love every day, you are in the right place. Grab a coffee, a notebook, and let's dig into today's episode. So for this first episode, let us explore what an interior designer really is. So let's start with the definition of the career, interior design. The Council for Interior Design Qualification states that interior design is the art and science of understanding people's behavior to create functional spaces within a building. That is a very technical definition, and basically what it's saying is that it takes intuition and some honed skills and education to bring about a very functional space that is also beautiful. Hopefully. So what do interior designers do? Well, let me tell you. There are very many types of interior designers. The most traditional being one who does kind of a little bit of everything. They will do kitchen and bath design, furnishing homes, selecting finishes, selecting light fixtures, paint colors, materials inside and outside, furnishing living spaces outside as well as inside, and for all rooms in the house. Of course, in this sense, I am talking about residential design. For the purposes of this show and what my knowledge base is best in, I am going to always be talking about residential interior design for the most part. A lot of designers do cross over to do both commercial and residential. I have done both in the past, and I just get the most joy out of residential design. That is where most of my strengths lie. That is where I get the most pleasure out of my career, and so that is what I have leaned into. However, I know very many designers who do excellent work at office building lobbies or restaurants or even healthcare. Interior design basically can be any interior space, so that covers a huge array. My expertise lies in residential design though, so that is where I'm going to focus most of my podcast on. I think that when people consider the career of interior design, for the most part, they're thinking about it in a residential sense because that is often what they see on TV. Some might get inspired by commercial spaces that they've been in, coffee shops, restaurants, things like that. Hotels, like many of the hotels in Las Vegas, are very inspiring. But I don't need to digress here. So for the ease of the podcast, I am always going to be referencing residential interior design. So how is an interior designer different from a decorator? Well, decoration is the furnishing or adorning of a space with fashionable or beautiful things. While an interior designer may assist with the decoration of the space, a decorator will not design per se. As a student of interior design when I was in college, it was very serious if someone mistakenly called me an interior decorator instead of an interior designer. And Primarily, I think because as I was going through my college career, that program was focused more on commercial design and code-based design. So healthcare and education, all of those commercial spaces that require an in-depth knowledge of codes, health, safety, and welfare of people in those spaces. And that is very technical and not a decorator's job. So as we were going through college, we definitely defined that distinction between a designer and a decorator. And it was almost an insult if someone said, "Oh, you're an interior decorator." Well, here we are 15 years later, and I honestly won't blink an eye if someone calls me an interior decorator over an interior designer. Most people just use those phrases interchangeably when they're talking about a residential interior designer who does do decorating. For those young students who are in the design program, I get it. You don't want to be called an interior decorator, but often designers do decorate, and I get a lot of joy out of it. So I'm not going to shame it for something that I enjoy doing. All right, so that is basically the difference between decorating and designing. Designing in a residential situation between a designer and a decorator, I would say designers are more inclined to be opening up walls, doing anything that is requiring floor plans that need permitting, that might need to bring on an engineer. Those types of changes to a house are definitely, I would say, under the purview of an interior designer as opposed to a decorator. Who would not be moving any walls, just adorning them. So with that clarification out of the way, why do I design? And I think that's another important facet to discuss on this first episode, just laying the groundwork of this very expansive subject matter. But the why of everything is so important. You should start with why. And that reminds me of a book that I definitely recommend, Start With Why by Simon Sinek. Read it. It's very good. Motivation is so important. And so let me answer that question for you, why I design. If we can improve a person's life, even a little bit, if not significantly, through interior design, then I have left the world a better place than when I found it. I always marvel at the huge role surroundings play in the productivity and mood of a person. Beauty, intention, significance, symmetry, they all work together to create an inviting and purposeful and inspiring space. And ever since I was little, I always had a recognition of how surroundings matter. I was always very sensitive to light values in a room, like whether natural light was coming in or not, if space felt dark, how that affected my mood, if a space felt bright, how that affected my energy. The color on the walls had this huge significance on how I felt in a space, as well as the furniture and the organization of a space and how it functioned. These were all things that I paid a lot of attention to subconsciously and consciously as a young person. So it is my intention as a designer to help my clients make their home be the best it can be for whatever their needs and preferences are in their life. So depending on what career they might have, say they are a medical professional that is in a very high stress environment, well, I want their home to be a place that restores and rejuvenates them so that they can be the best medical professional for their client. If you have ever walked into a home that immediately you kind of feel depressed and down in, well, imagine living there all the time. I think it is my job as a designer to help my clients, whether they are aware of it or not, to live their lives to the fullest in their own homes. So that is the satisfaction that I get also out of my career, is knowing that I have improved other people's lives through the work that I do. So interior designers matter. And if you choose to take on the career of interior design, then I think you will also find it very rewarding. I have heard it said that interior design is one of the most complicated careers. The amount of information that you need to know is quite vast. And so no one can know it all. And that's why we definitely rely on a team. Even if you're a solo interior designer, a team of engineers and architects and vendors who can help you get the information you need to know to create a beautiful space. So let's cover briefly the different paths you can get into interior design, and we will discuss these in much more detail in later episodes. But I wanted to explore what a traditional path would look like as well as the non-traditional path. So I would say I came to interior design quite traditionally. I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a creative, and I loved helping my parents make decisions for their home, and I was always doing something creative. So when it came time to decide what major I wanted to do in college, I looked at basically if there was interior design, or what I thought at the time actually was, I didn't even know it was called interior design. I looked at the majors that were in the creative avenues. So I looked at architecture. I was not sure that was the way I wanted to go. I had the assumption that architecture required a lot of math, and not that I was bad at math, it just didn't inspire me. Although I did enjoy drawing floor plans along with my cousin, who is now a builder as well, when we were young. And like 10 and 12, and we'd just be making up our dream homes in floor plans. And so I did find that fun, but I wasn't sure I wanted to make a whole career out of it. You know, I probably should have looked a little more into architecture, but to see what it was really like before I made that decision. But it was not inspiring regardless at the time. So then I looked at some of the fine arts, painting, art history, and different things like that. And that's when I found interior design. And I didn't even know at the time, like most people, that there was a difference between interior decorating and interior design and exactly what an interior designer was. So I had to go down that path by reading the description of the major. So I looked at different colleges that offered interior design as a major. And so I looked at New York. I looked at down in Southern California. And then finally, I found one right in my backyard in Sacramento at CSU Sacramento. And they did offer an interior design program. And I'm trying to remember now, this was back in the mid-90s when I was doing my research. I want to say that the major was actually attached to like a home economics type of degree. It would be interesting to go back and pull out my paperwork or see if I can do a little digging on that, because they were transitioning at that time, pulling, I think, interior design out of the applied arts into more of a technical side. And now it is actually called interior architecture, and they only do commercial design. They only teach about commercial design at that school. So, but anyway, at that time in the mid-90s, I decided to stay home and go to CSU Sacramento and get my 4-year degree in interior design. One of the requirements of the program is that you do an internship with a designer. I had a friend who had done an internship. She was a little bit ahead of me in the program. And then she got me an internship at the same place. And so I was very pleased to be there. It's a very well-known designer in our area. And he did both high-end residential and restaurant design and lighting design. And so it's just a joy to get that internship. And then after that, I stayed on working for him for part-time through a lot of my college career. So I gained a lot of hands-on experience that way, as well as the classical education through my college. And then when it came time to graduate, there was not a position for me full-time for that designer. And so I got a job as a model home designer, working for someone locally who primarily only did model homes for builders. And she shared an office with her husband, who is an architect, and he needed some drafting help as well. So I worked for both of them, doing design for her, doing some drafting for him. And that went on for several years until the recession hit. So at that time, model homes were probably the very first thing to get hit. production homes came to a screeching halt because of that housing bubble, I started looking for another job. And then at that time, I had a friend reach out to me and asked if I could help her with her home. She needed a few furniture pieces, some paint colors, and just some help on that. So I decided to, explore the avenue of doing design on my own. And I thought, well, let's make this legit. And I got my business license. I researched and looked through all the things that you need to do to set up your business, opened some trade accounts, and just started my own little side hustle, Rebecca Ward Design. And it was so exhilarating to me, like the whole starting a business. I mean, I should have known it was in my blood because my dad is a serial entrepreneur. He had his own optometry practice, and he also had many side businesses that my family was involved in as I was growing up. So I had it in my blood to be an entrepreneur. And once I got that taste after, starting one project on my own, I found the process of starting a business was very exhilarating and exciting, and just trying to figure out how to get clients and advertise and set up a website and all those things. So it took a while for it to get its feet. So I had my side hustle, and then I worked for an architecture firm for a while as a draftsperson. So they did production homes. That was slowing down. They also did a lot of high-end residential. So I got some really good experience learning how to put plan sets together, drawing architectural details, a very good, I'd say, like architectural education at that firm. I learned a lot of things I didn't learn in school on how to put those architectural plan sets together and what was required and when you needed an engineer and all those things. Unfortunately, after about a year of working there, the economy continued to slow down and that firm had to close its doors. And I went back to working for the designer I did my internship with, and he was looking for some help to finish out a restaurant project that they were doing. And so I went on with him for about 6 months, and then he had to downsize and retain only one of his staff. And so, the economy was just so bad. This was 2008. And so finally, in January of 2009, I was officially unemployed, but officially self-employed, I guess I could say. So I put full effort into growing my business, and I made a connection, and I would say it's always about who you know. I made a connection with an architectural designer who needed a draftsperson. A friend of mine was drafting for him, and she was moving away. She thought I would be a good fit for him. And what he primarily needed a designer for was designing kitchens and baths and drafting those up. And eventually I also did full plan sets for him. And I continued to work with him through this day. On occasion, I will bring him in as an architect, or, if we are doing very complicated plans or adding on, then I'll work with him and he refers me out to some of his clients. But I got a very good education on kitchen and bath design through that process. And so I primarily did drafting for him for several years as I built up my clientele. So that was my basic path into having my own business in interior design. And I think I would definitely say a lot of it was based on who I knew and the connections that I made. But what made me more marketable was the education that I had, especially my drafting skills. At the time when I was coming out of college, a lot of the more senior designers did not or chose not to learn to draft on the computer. They would do everything by hand. And so transitioning over to computer drafting, which is a skill that I had, made me a lot more marketable to some of those firms. And to this day, I still recommend it as a really important skill to have, if nothing else for yourself. But if you're looking to work for another designer, that is always a skill that is very transferable. Some designers will hire it out if they can't do it themselves. And so there you go. So I'm going to leave it at that for this first episode, kind of just the tip of the iceberg of all the things that we are going to explore in the Design Curious podcast. Thank you for joining me today. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, getting an understanding and an introduction to what interior design really is, and hearing a little bit about my own path and journey into that design world. If you'd like to stay connected and get on our mailing list, I'd love to send you 3 tips I wish I had known when I had started out in interior design. So head over to the links in the show notes to get that download sent to you today. Don't forget to like and subscribe the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And keep on exploring if interior design is the career for you. See you in next week's episode. To celebrate the launch of my podcast, 5 lucky winners will enjoy a 1-year membership to My Design Mentor, my residential interior design career coaching program, and that is a $279 value to help kickstart your career in interior design, or get mentoring on if this is the right career for you and understand all the ins and outs of it. All you need to do is subscribe and leave a rating and a review. How simple! I'll post the link to enter in the show notes. Thanks for listening. If you love this episode, please leave a rating and a review. This helps me reach other curious creatives like you. If you have a topic request or would like to contact me, simply head over to my website, rwarddesign.com, or email me at podcast@rwarddesign.com.